The ballroom was exquisite marble floors, polished to a mirror shine, glittering chandeliers that cast soft light on guests dressed in tailored suits and elegant gowns. Waiters glided past with trays of champagne. Laughter echoed off the high ceilings, and a jazz quartet filled the air with soft melodies. This was the wedding of Richard Langston, a man who had built an empire from nothing, and was now marrying a woman half his age in an event more fitting for royalty than a CEO. Everything was perfect. At least on the surface, but hidden from the center, far from the tables where the important guests gathered, sat Emily Langston, his only daughter. Emily was 17. 3 years earlier, she'd been in a car accident on her way home from school. The spinal injury had left her paralyzed from the waist down. Since then, she'd lived her life in a wheelchair, attending private tutors and physical therapy sessions while her father's world kept turning. Though he had provided her with everything money could buy: custom mobility equipment, a full-time nurse, state-of-the-art medical care, he rarely gave her what she wanted most: time, attention, and a sense of normalcy. At the wedding, Emily wore a soft blue dress that shimmered slightly under the lights. Her hair was curled, makeup done with care, but none of it could hide the feeling of detachment that clung to her like a second skin. From the moment she was wheeled into the venue, she could tell she was part of the decor, not the experience. Guests passed her without glancing down. Conversations flowed above her, and no one bent to meet her gaze. Even when she made eye contact, most simply offered a tight smile and kept walking. The wedding planner, who'd fussed over centerpieces for hours, hadn't considered her seating arrangement beyond pushing her wheelchair into a corner of the ballroom where it wouldn't be in the way. It was quieter there, behind a large floral display that shielded her from most of the crowd's view. She could still see the dance floor, though watching the swirl of fabric and laughter that seemed so close and yet unreachable. What made it worse wasn't overt cruelty. It was the subtle indifference. She wasn't being ignored maliciously. No one said anything hurtful. They just didn't know what to say. They didn't know how to include her without it feeling forced, and so they said nothing at all. She was too young for the adults, too different for the teenagers, and too complicated for polite small talk. Her father had been busy from the start. He waved briefly when she arrived, then was swept up in speeches and posing for photos. Emily couldn't blame him entirely. He was the groom. But it stung more than she admitted. This was his new beginning. His new wife was radiant, commanding attention with every step. Emily had only met her twice before the wedding. They had exchanged polite greetings, never bonding. Tonight, her father and his new bride were the stars. Emily was background noise. She sat still, trying not to fidget, even as her legs remained numb beneath the gown. She sipped from a glass of water and let her eyes scan the room, watching but not engaging. The loneliness was a familiar feeling. By now, like a shadow she couldn't shake. It wasn't the first event where she'd felt invisible. After her accident, people began talking around her instead of to her. Teachers became awkward. Friends faded. Even family struggled to navigate conversations without bringing up the incident. It was easier for them to pretend nothing had changed, even though everything had. The wedding was just another example of that silent exclusion, beautifully lit, elegantly decorated, but emotionally barren for someone like her. Even the photographer had been careful to crop her out. She noticed, during family photos, he angled the lens just so, pretending it was about symmetry or lighting, but Emily knew. Her wheelchair didn't fit the perfect narrative. It ruined the aesthetic. She didn't want attention for being disabled. She just wanted to be seen not for her condition, but for who she was underneath it. Someone who still laughed at bad jokes, who loved fantasy novels, who designed digital art late into the night on her tablet. Someone who had dreams, opinions, stories, but none of that mattered here. Here, she was the quiet daughter of the powerful man, marked by tragedy, and placed gently out of sight. Time passed. The room buzzed with energy, but none of it touched her. Her nurse had offered to stay close by, but Emily had declined. She didn't want to look like she needed a chaperone. She didn't want more reminders of what made her different. She watched the dance floor as the bride and groom swayed in each other's arms, perfectly in sync. Guests clapped. The music shifted to something more upbeat, and couples joined in. Emily watched a group of bridesmaids twirl each other in drunken joy. One of them tripped and fell, and the whole group burst into laughter. No one even looked her way. She smiled at the moment, but it faded quickly. A lump rose in her throat, one she swallowed back with practiced ease. Crying here would make her even more invisible, or worse, visible in the wrong way. A pity story. The sad girl in the corner. She hated that more than the isolation itself, and still, she remained in the shadow of the celebration. No one noticed the girl who had lost more than the ability to walk. They didn't see how hard she had worked just to make it through the year. How she practiced for hours to maneuver her chair smoothly enough to blend in. How she had rehearsed small talk in her head, only to be left out of conversations entirely. It wasn't about being the center of attention. It was about being part of the moment. About being a daughter, a guest, a person, not a quiet afterthought. There was no outrage, no cruel remarks, just a soft, relentless erasure. Until someone, just one person, looked beyond the surface. But until then, in that glittering room full of smiles and champagne, Emily sat cloaked in quiet dignity, present but unseen. He wasn't meant to be there, not really. Daniel had been invited as a +1, a quiet single father accompanying a cousin to the CEO's grand wedding. The invitation had arrived on expensive cardstock, embossed and sealed, clearly not intended for people like him, people who weren't board members or shareholders or trust fund recipients. Still, his cousin insisted. "It'll be good for you to get out," she said. "You never go anywhere since the divorce." And so Daniel went, more out of obligation than desire. The venue was overwhelming. Towering ceilings, golden chandeliers, a polished marble floor that reflected every shimmer of light and movement. People moved about with careful elegance, champagne, flutes in hand, small talk flowing with the practiced ease of seasoned socialites. Daniel felt like a ghost drifting among them, politely nodding at introductions he would never remember. Sipping slowly from a glass he didn't want to refill. He stuck close to the edges of the room, letting his cousin navigate the crowd. At one point, she disappeared into a circle of friends, and Daniel found himself lingering near a table draped in white linen, staring absently at the dance floor. He watched the couple dance, their first dance, a choreography of grace and money. The CEO, Richard Langston, was a man whose face Daniel had seen in business magazines but never imagined meeting. He danced well for a man in his 50s, smiling like the world owed him nothing and had already given him everything. But it wasn't the dancing that caught Daniel's attention. It was the figure sitting alone just beyond the edge of the celebration, mostly hidden behind a decorative pillar and an absurdly tall arrangement of roses. A teenage girl in a wheelchair. She was still, her back straight, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her dress was lovely soft blue, flowing just enough to hint at movement even when she couldn't move. Her hair was curled with care, her face calm. But there was something unmistakably heavy in the way she held herself. Not sadness exactly. More like patience, long, tired patience. No one seemed to be talking to her. Daniel watched for a moment, then longer. Guests passed her by without so much as a glance. The servers avoided her corner entirely, their tray roots arcing around. Her position like she didn't exist. The photographer, who had been snapping candid shots near the dance floor, visibly hesitated when he panned in her direction, then turned away without pressing the shutter. It was a choice, not an accident. The girl was excluded, quietly but unmistakably. Daniel knew that look. He knew the stillness, the forced composure. His own daughter, Lily, had sat like that at more than one family gathering. Lily, who had cerebral palsy. Lily, who once whispered to him during a birthday party, "It's okay, Dad. I don't think they know how to talk to me." She had been 5 then. The memory was sharp, and it stirred something deep in his chest. Now, he didn't know this girl didn't know her name, her story, or what she was thinking, but he recognized the isolation. It was one thing to be physically separated. It was another to be emotionally invisible. That kind of loneliness didn't shout or sob. It settled in the bones. Daniel walked toward her slowly, unsure of what he would say. He didn't want to embarrass her, didn't want to be one more person who approached her with a look of pity or uncomfortable kindness. She deserved better than that. As he neared, the girl looked up. Her expression was neutral, guarded. She had the eyes of someone accustomed to strangers approaching with either forced warmth or too much curiosity. Daniel didn't do either. He just smiled. Mind if I sit with you a minute? He asked. The girl blinked, as if uncertain whether she had heard him correctly. Then she nodded. "Sure," she said quietly. He pulled over a chair and sat. Not too close, but close enough to speak without raising his voice. For a few seconds, neither of them said anything. The music had shifted. Again, some classical piece Daniel didn't recognize. "I'm Daniel," he offered eventually. "I'm not exactly high society. My cousin dragged me here." That earned a faint smile. "Emily," she said. "Daughter of the groom." He nodded. "Thought you might be. You look a little like him. Around the eyes." Emily shrugged. As if that observation mattered little. "People say that you're not dancing." She tilted her head slightly, glancing down at the chair beneath her. "Hard to compete with stilettos and waltzes." Daniel chuckled. "You'd be surprised. My daughter could probably outdance half the people in this room, but she'd never be invited to try." Emily's eyes flickered. She looked at him. "Properly now. Your daughter uses a wheelchair." "No, braces and a walker most of the time," he said. "But same energy. Same social barriers." Emily's expression softened. She relaxed a little, as if the invisible barrier between them had thinned. "People don't really know what to do with us." "No," he agreed. "They either pretend we're not there, or treat us like mascots." She laughed. Hurley laughed. The kind that came from surprise. "Exactly." They talked for a while. About books, about school, about how weddings were often less about the couple and more about the performance. Daniel didn't push for personal details, didn't ask about the accident or the injury. She didn't offer, and he didn't need her to. After a while, the band shifted to a slower song. Daniel looked out at the dance floor, then back at Emily. Do you want to be out there? He asked. She hesitated, then said, it's not that simple. I know. But if you did, would you? A pause. Then yes. Daniel stood and looked toward the crowd, then back at her. Then, let's make it that simple. She blinked. What are you? He turned, raised his voice just slightly, enough to reach the band and the first few rows of dancers. Excuse me, he said. Heads turned. He didn't raise his voice. Further, he didn't need to. There was something about his tone that commanded attention. I think there's someone here who deserves to be on that floor just as much as anyone else. The music softened. The bride looked confused. The groom paused mid-step. Emily flushed. You don't have to I know I don't, he said quietly. But I want to. He held out a hand. Not to pull her up. Just to invite her, and she took it.